From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
At the Legislature today, the new cabinet-level secretary of the Department of Veterans Assistance appears before the House Finance Committee as lawmakers pledge to do all they can to help veterans in the state. And a former governor of the state of Wyoming visits with lawmakers today to discuss West Virginia's future. And Michael Sullivan will discuss that with us on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. Upper Big Branch mine investigators told a joint Judiciary Committee forum today that the deaths of 29 miners were preventable and that legislation needs to be enacted to ensure that such an event doesn't occur again. Dennis Odell of the United Mine Workers Union says the event can be called industrial homicide, and that's why his organization's report is labeled as such.
As you can tell, the flames and forces were so violent that those 29 miners didn't even realize what was going on. While our investigation found physical conditions that led to the coal dust explosion was a result of a series of basic safety violations, Massey's unlawful policies and practices, and culture of intimidation of miners.
The lead investigator for the governor's independent investigation panel, David McAteer, says the UBB explosion is squarely on the shoulders of Massey Energy.
This disaster was the responsibility of the management of the Massey Energy Company. It was the failure of this company to comply with the laws of the state of West Virginia and to comply with the laws of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, the law of Mine Safety and Health Act.
Odell told lawmakers that Massey Energy managers valued production over safety and that it's their responsibility to see that it doesn't happen again.
Not finger pointing. These are facts. This is what happens in the industry whenever legislators like yourself do not take corrective action to make sure things like this do not occur in the future.
This mine was operated in a way that should not have happened. It should not have happened by these mine operators, nor should it have been allowed to happen by the state agency and the federal agency. There were shortcomings to go around.
Odell told lawmakers that drugs and alcohol were not involved in the disaster at the Upper Big Branch mine. He indicated that legislation requiring the drug testing of miners would be unnecessary.
While we recognize that the safest environment must be provided for our miners, and we strongly believe that no miner should be allowed to work or be exposed to workers under the influence of drugs and alcohol, there were no drugs and alcohol involved at Upper Big Branch. But there's no proven data out there that says that drugs and alcohol is a contributing factor to any of the coal mining deaths and fatalities that we've seen in recent years.
Instead, Odell told lawmakers that the legislature should focus on passing laws that deal with creating safer mines based on scientific data. McAteer's safety recommendations dealt with how to deal with and monitor coal dust. The House has two bills under consideration that deal with mine safety. House Bill 4085 comes from House Speaker Rick Thompson, while House Bill 4351 is at the request of Governor Earl Ray Tomblin. The state Senate will vote tomorrow on the bill that will make it a crime to interfere with a 911 emergency call. Another bill relating to personal safety orders issued by magistrates against sexual predators or stalkers is also up for a vote. Both bills are being advocated by the State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Among the other bills advancing to passage stage is a measure to ban tattoos on anyone under the age of 16 and require parental consent for anyone ages 16 to 18. Raleigh County Senator Mike Green sponsored the measure because of an incident in Beckley.
There was a parent who came in, her 13-year-old daughter had received a tattoo without any parental consent, and on the books there was nothing that we could do against that tattoo parlor. So this is at the request of Magistrate Steve Massey there in Raleigh County. This is actually the third year the bill's been introduced. That's never really gained any momentum until this year.
Senator Herb Snyder led a group of 7 senators introducing a measure to greatly increase the penalties for copper wire theft. Snyder says some towns and neighborhoods have been cut off from emergency communications for many hours because of wire thieves. The bill now goes to the Judiciary Committee. The House Finance Committee is in its final week of budget hearings. As Adam Cavalier reports, those hearings continue today with the Department of Veterans Assistance.
The Department of Veterans Assistance's $11 million budget comprises just 0.2 of a percentage point of West Virginia's $4.3 billion budget. Department Secretary Keith Gwynn says that doesn't make his organization any less important.
The mission of the Department of Veterans Assistance is to aid, assist, counsel, look at the rights and interests of all veterans of the state of West Virginia and their dependents. We approximately have 185,000 veterans in the state. Through 16 field offices and 2 claims offices, we have assisted veterans and their dependents this year with monetary benefits of over $161 million coming into the state. Last year, we took in about $141 million, so it's been increasing every year.
Kanawha County Democrat Nancy Guthrie didn't serve in a war, but she says that doesn't dampen her passion for helping those who have and are enlisted.
That organization is key. I mean, you've got to have someone that's the clearinghouse for not only the volunteer groups, but also for folks coming back in, folks who are here, folks who served in wars, not the current ones, but other wars. Somebody has to be the central area to make sure all of that comes together so that we're delivering the services that are meaningful not only to those veterans, but to those veterans' families and their children.
Gwynn says the organization has 2 issues with the governor's $11 million budget proposal.
One being the Veterans Transportation Program. This is a per diem program that pays drivers $75 a day. This was created by the legislature. It started out at 50 and was raised to 75. This provides drivers in certain areas that we cannot attain those drivers to provide these transportation to the clinics. Last year, we were $125,000 short. We had to transfer over money from other funds. This year, we did not have that funds to transfer over. Unfortunately, if we asked for $225,000. If we do not receive that in the budget, we either be forced to take up to legislation to reduce this to back to $50, or every 3rd month we will have to cut the payments to the drivers.
Harrison County Democrat and U.S. Army veteran Richard Iaquinta says it would be best to make certain that veterans do have access to transportation.
When the needs are as great as they are, it's tough when you're in a rural, isolated area, and that's the reason we have the vans that go out to the communities, and that's the reason we have the small shops that will help us get the veteran to where they need to be. But not all the hospitals offer all the services that we sometimes need for the veterans of the state of West Virginia.
The other issue Gwynn says the organization faces is paying $30,000 more in rent for a space on Kanawha Boulevard. Gwynn told lawmakers that the space would allow the department to house all of its administrative staff in one place. He says both issues stem from a 5% budget cut 2 years ago.
The only place we had to take it was from the van drivers program because we weren't using it at that time. And it reduced that, I think it was $250,000 we reduced that amount by. Unfortunately, last year we had a significant increase, and it was we were $125,000 short, somewhere around there, and we had to transfer it from another fund. This year we don't have that enough to cover it.
Guthrie says the legislature needs to find ways to help the state's veterans.
If you've got a veteran and they're only contact with somebody in many instances, to have some fellowship with other folks who have gone through similar experiences. I mean, if we can't find $75 a day to get a driver so that we can bring those people together, whether or not it's just for fellowship or whether or not it's medical care, whatever it is that those folks need, because of the number of people in West Virginia who serve and who have served, I think it's the least we can do. And so that's one of those parts of the entire state budget that I think members feel very protective of.
Iaquinta says he'd like to see some consolidation among the state's 4 VA hospitals.
We'd like to combine them, and we've let our representatives in Washington, D.C. realize that having 4 different government veterans hospitals in 4 different districts is a little disheartening, and we'd like to get them all on the same page, and then that way we can trade information and maybe provide a little bit better service.
The state has VA clinics in Huntington, Clarksburg, Beckley, and Martinsburg. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Cavalier in Charleston.
More than 30 years ago, some lawmakers in the state of Wyoming thought it would be a good idea to create a permanent fund to help that state when the oil, gas, and coal ran out. Now, such an idea is emerging in West Virginia. Bob Brunner has the story.
Former Wyoming Governor Mike Sullivan discussed the fund in several appearances before leadership groups, including the Senate Economic Development Committee. His state's fund has grown to more than $5 billion and provides about 25% of its general revenue budget each year. Wyoming voters made it part of the Constitution. Jefferson County Senator Herb Snyder's enthused about the idea. He says 30 years from now in West Virginia, people could look back at 2012 and say, that's the year we started something big.
This is a savings account for our future generations. And what better place if you're mining, extracting something from the state, be it either timber or coal or gas or coal bed methane, whatever it is, you're setting some of that aside for future generations so you just don't mine it all out and have nothing. And eventually, the extraction industry, we're not making more coal down in the earth. It takes hundreds of millions of years to form that into gas. So we ought to have the foresight to set some of that aside when that coal's gone.
Finance Chair Senator Roman Prezioso says there are many questions to be answered before such a fund could be started in West Virginia.
We have to construct this bill in a way that it doesn't have a detriment to the general budget because of the decline of mineral industries in the future. You know, the anticipation of Marcellus Shale is predicated on those gas prices. And right now, those prices are low. We have to find a number, a base number that we can work off of and move forward accordingly. I don't think we're there quite yet.
Committee Chair Senator Richard Browning agreed to delay action on the bill until more financial figures are put together for Friday's committee meeting.
I think we've turned a corner in West Virginia that we can now start looking at things for the future like this that will take care of our business development and also our people in the form of lower taxes.
Senators are now just becoming aware that a state of similar size, Wyoming, has built a $5 billion trust fund simply by collecting taxes from natural gas, coal, and other minerals that have been extracted. Some senators believe the idea of a constitutional amendment to guarantee the fund could not be raided by future legislatures will mean at least another year of study before a final vote is taken. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Bob Brunner in Charleston.
In a moment, more about this proposal for a future fund with the former governor of Wyoming. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 528 to require scrap metal dealers to obtain a business license. The bill also requires certain information to be obtained for each scrap metal transaction. Senate Bill 531 to create a special registration plate for motor vehicles for the hearing impaired. Senate Bill 534 to enact the West Virginia Innovation Free Trade Act of 2012 to encourage the development and use in the state of emerging technologies. And Senate Bill 535 to expand prescriptive authority for physician assistants, advanced nurse practitioners, and osteopathic physician assistants to include medications for chronic health conditions. Among the bills up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 54 to prohibit minors under the age of 16 from obtaining a tattoo. The bill requires a parent or legal guardian to be present at the tattoo studio, provide photo identification, and written consent for minors 16 years of age or older to obtain a tattoo. Senate Bill 414, Governor Tomlin's bill to include various additional professions under the definition of medical services applicant under the Volunteer for Nonprofit Youth Organizations Act. This is in reference to volunteers at the Boy Scout Adventure Camp. And Senate Bill 427, conforming administrative remedies for prisoner complaints with federal standards. Creating sustainable wealth from non-renewable resources was the topic of today's annual meeting of the West Virginia Center for Budget and Policy. And the center brought a high-ranking lobbyist to Charleston to speak to that cause. Joining us tonight is Michael Sullivan. He served as governor of Wyoming from 1987 to 1995 and as ambassador to Ireland under the Clinton administration from 1999 to 2001. And joining us also is Ted Bettner, the executive director of the Center on Budget and Policy. Gentlemen, welcome. Glad you're here. And welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Beth.
So, Governor, what did you want to share with our lawmakers today?
Well, I'm so shocked to be called a high-ranking lobbyist. I don't know what to say. I was asked to come to West Virginia to relate and inform the center, the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, and as it turned out, I testified before the Economic Development Committee to talk about Wyoming's experience with its minerals. There are very many similarities between Wyoming and West Virginia. We're an oil producer, a coal producer, and a natural gas producer. And 36 years ago, the legislature, and it was before my time as governor, and the governor got together and established a permanent mineral trust fund, which takes a part of the severance tax which we assess against the minerals, puts it into a trust fund that is inviolate by reason of it having been established by a constitutional amendment. And then the money that is spun off from those funds, the investment income, it goes into the general fund and thereby sort of levels out both the general fund income and provides a legacy for future generations when the minerals are no longer available and are depleted. So I wasn't selling anything. I was just explaining our position and the fact that that fund now has $5.3 billion and provides, I think it is averaged about 18% of the funding for the general fund budget.
What do you envision this money being used for in the future?
It will be used for it's not, in Wyoming at least, it's not earmarked. It will be used for programs that are needed that may not be able to be funded if it isn't there. Somebody said, well, what has it done? What programs has it helped? And I said, the best way I can explain it is during my time of 8 years, which were the very difficult times, one of the busts in the mineral business, the Mineral Trust Fund provided as much as 25% of our general funds, because the general fund was lower, but the investment income was fairly stable from that fund, and so it funded 25% of the needs of the children, the police, infrastructure,
education,
and other things
all
that
those
we do
bills.
as state governments.
All those bills. What are you proposing, Mr. Bettner?
Well, we just recently did a study on creating this type of fund, and we looked at an increase of 1% in the severance tax on natural gas and coal. And what we found is if we did that, by 2035, we'd have close to $4 billion in the fund. And over that time, we could take out about 5% on average per year and put it towards investments and needs in West Virginia. So we're a state that's rich in natural resources, but we have really bad economic welfare indicators that we think that this trust fund could address. We also have a low tax capacity in the state. We rank really low in per capita income, median income, so our tax base is low. But a lot of our wealth lies beneath the hills of West Virginia, and this Marcellus Shale offers a wonderful opportunity to look at this. And I think there's a recognition that we don't want to repeat the past as we did with coal, because God knows if we just had a little tax on coal since 1935, we'd be looking at a fund a lot bigger than the $5.4 billion fund in Wyoming. We'd see a lot bigger. We'd have a lot more assets. And this also means lower taxes, too, in the future for people of West Virginia, because we'll be able to use that interest to invest in the programs that are needed.
Historically in West Virginia, it was very difficult getting that severance tax passed initially in the beginning. West Virginia has a rainy day fund, $800 million sitting there, and I'm told that the reason we have it is because of this boom and bust economy that we have. So what would you propose? A rainy day fund and an energy future trust fund?
Yeah, absolutely. We were just talking about this. Actually, Wyoming has the second biggest rainy day fund. It's over $1.4 billion, and Alaska has the biggest, and these are both states that have mineral trust funds, so they both understand. And it's a little bit different. The rainy day fund is really for a drop-off in personal income and sales, which make up over 2/3 of our general revenue fund. And the beauty of this type of trust fund is that you can use that interest income, and it can go towards things like early childhood development, economic diversification, infrastructure. These are the things that we need to be making investments in today. This offers an opportunity to do that, but also offers an opportunity for our grandkids and our kids to have a future. How proud would we be if we enacted this today, and 20 years from now we can look back, or 30 years, like Mr. Sullivan is today, and looking back and being glad that they did something like this.
It's in your Constitution that this money has to be diverted into this fund.
This portion of the severance tax goes into the fund and then can't just at the whim of the legislature when things get tough be taken out.
Right.
The income is used, but the corpus, the principal, is incapable of being tapped, which I think has been very beneficial because we've gone through hard times while we had that fund, but nobody was tempted to go there because the people had said that's for the future, that's long term, and that's how what I would say as it relates to the rainy day fund. The rainy day there is for a real rainy day. This repeats itself. It's there again and again and again as long as you're not tapping into the principle.
Would you propose a constitutional amendment such as Wyoming did?
I think that's one way to go at it too. You could also enact requirements in the legislature that you need 4/5 of both sides to.
Because I can tell you right now, you know the arguments against raising taxes on severance tax, on coal, natural gas, timber, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Because people will say, West Virginia is being anti-business, you're not being business friendly, and you're raising taxes on business, and business can't do business here when you tax them too much. You've heard those arguments. You've probably heard those arguments.
Sure, they're the same, and I would say that the discussion with the Economic Development Committee wasn't necessarily centered on raising taxes. If there's going to be an increase in the existing severance tax, there's nothing to be said you can't tap some of that increase to set it aside for long-term benefits. You're not going to get it unless you start somewhere, and it may not necessarily be raising taxes to do it.
Is the place to start this with the Marcellus Shale?
I think so. I think that coal would be an important addition to this, especially as we're going to see a projected decline of 50% in southern West Virginia. So, but also there's a workers' comp debt that's being paid down, and that should be paid down in the next 3 years, and that's 56 cents per ton. And there's also a levy on natural gas. It brings in about $80 to $90 million. So why not just keep that on? Then we're not raising taxes whatsoever, and they're used to the burden that's currently in place in law today.
We will watch this issue if it moves through the legislature. Governor Michael Sullivan and Ted Bettner, the Center for Budget and Policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. I've enjoyed being in West Virginia.
Thank you. And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 4438, authorizing the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Resources to directly contract with provider-sponsored networks to develop a direct, collaborative managed care relationship with the department, its Bureau for Medical Services, and providers of medical care to Medicaid enrollees. House Bill 4441 to remove driver and commercial driver licenses from the identified licenses which may be revoked when in arrearage on child support payments. House Bill 4442 to require automated external defibrillators in public schools and require one school employee at each school be trained in the use of the device and CPR. House Bill 4445 to create the crime of soliciting a minor, provide penalties, and require that the offender register on the Sex Offender Registry. House Bill 4446 to provide a source of funding for infrastructure projects in those counties that produce natural gas from the Marcellus or Utica Shale Formation. House Bill 4450 to develop a senior farmers market nutrition program fund within the Department of Agriculture to add $30 in state money to the $20 vouchers provided to senior citizens with federal funds. And House Bill 4453 to limit the liability of landowners who make land available for military, law enforcement, or homeland defense training. Up for passage in the House tomorrow, House Bill 4271 to require the electronic submission of reports relating to the business and operations of licensed mortgage lenders, brokers, and servicers, and to release the Commissioner of Banking from the duty to publish an aggregate analysis of the information. And House Bill 4356 to add a misdemeanor for child neglect, creating a substantial risk of bodily injury. On second reading, the amendment stage in the House tomorrow, Senate Bill 469, Governor Tomlin's bill to address the liability of OPEB, other post-employment benefits. And House Bill 4127, that the governor shall, by proclamation, declare August 7th as a special Memorial Day to be known as Purple Heart Recognition Day, honoring all West Virginians who, while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, have been wounded or killed in action, and encourage all municipalities and counties in the state to do the same. This has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow, a special report on the City of Huntington's efforts to curb drug trafficking. We'll also talk with Supreme Court Justice Brent Benjamin and learn more about the system of adult drug courts in the state. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.